So questions 1 and 2, by the way, please note, today is 9.2a. This is section 9.2 in the book, so if you have questions, you can always go there. Tomorrow's going to be 9.2b, and Thursday's going to be 9.2c, because like I said, we're doing the same thing, just slightly increasing in difficulty each day. All right? So, find the value of c that completes the square. Now, when it says completes the square, what did I call that yesterday? Does anyone remember?
A perfect square.
That makes a perfect square trinomial. Same thing. Okay? Same thing. How do we find that c value? We take b, we divide it by what? 2, and then we what? Square it. So in this problem, what is my b value? Negative 34 divided by 2. What is negative 34 divided by 2? 17. This is where your calculator might come in. By the way, it's not 17, it's negative 17. And then I'm going to square it. What is negative 17 squared?
289.
Look at you. You guys sound like geniuses. 289. Part of being a genius is knowing what to use and when to use it. So there's my value of c that would make that a perfect square trinomial. Now from last night, what would this factor into if it was x squared minus 34x plus 289? X what? Minus 17 squared. Right? That's what we went over yesterday. So if I had to factor, that would be my answer. And where did I get that minus 17 from? It's whatever number is in there before you square it. All right? So number 2, if I need to find the value of c, I'm going to take what number? 38, divide it by 2. What does that give me? 19. And then I'm going to square it, and that gets me what? God, you're too fast for me. 361. So there's my value of c, and then if I had to factor, what would this factor into? P plus 19 squared. Now, why am I emphasizing this? What would it factor into? Because if you can remember that, you don't have to snowflake on these. Okay? And it just saves you some time. Okay? All right, so now we're going to get into this thing called solve the equation by completing the square. So let me step back for a minute. We did some problems a little while ago where I would give you something like this. 2x minus 1 equals 0, and you had to solve it. Do you remember this?
Yes.
And you would take x plus 3, you set it equal to 0. You would get x equals negative 3. And then you'd do the same thing over here. Do you remember this?
Yeah.
How many answers would you get each time? 2. And I promised you'd get 2 every time, right? Except for if both of them were the same number, then you could just list it once, right? So we're always going to get 2 answers. We've got the same thing going on the other side. The difference with what we're doing on the other side, this whole completing the square thing versus this, is this was something that was factored. So we could factor this and then solve it from there, which is easier than completing the square, but not everything can be factored. Occasionally I might get something like this, that if I were to try to snowflake it, and I put the negative 48 on top, and the 2 on the bottom, this one may work out, but it's defeating the purpose if I actually factor this one. But you're going to get somewhere the snowflake wouldn't even work, so you couldn't factor it to begin with, in which case you use this completing the square method. Okay? So, that's why we do this, because not everything is factorable. So, how do you complete the square? Listen carefully. Step 1. C has to be all the way on the other side of the equal sign. What's C in this problem? Negative 48. So I'm going to move C by adding 48 to both sides. But watch how I'm going to write this. I'm going to leave a blank where the C was. And then 0 plus 48 is 48. It's just a blank. Don't freak out. It's just a blank. What do you think I'm going to fill in that blank with?
The factor.
What have we been doing up here? Finding values of C that make things factor nicely, haven't we? So how do you think I could find the value of C that I should put here so that I can get something that's going to factor nice? I'm going to take B, divide it by 2, and square it. So my B value is 2. Divided by 2 is what? Squared is. So guess what? I'm going to put a plus 1 right there. But Mrs. Franken, you just added something to the problem that wasn't there to begin with. Well, you know what? There is a property of equality that says you can add something to the problem as long as you do it to both sides. So I'm okay to have this plus 1 here as long as I do it to the other side too. You okay with that? That's the hardest part.
Remembering to do that?
Yep. Remembering to do that on both sides. Now, we know how to factor this. What does it factor into? It factors into something squared if I did it right. What would it factor into? X plus 1 squared equals, what's 48 plus 1? 49. Didn't we learn how to solve something like this? Can I square root both sides? That gives me x plus 1 equals what? Positive and negative 7. Oh my gosh, we're building on so much previous knowledge.
Oh no. I threw that in the trash.
It's called learning.
What's learning?
So, what are my two answers going to be? Do you remember how I have to add this or subtract it? I do positive 7 minus 1, which is 6. And then negative 7 minus 1, which is negative 8. And there's my two answers.
This is where I get the answers wrong. I can't do this.
That's why we're practicing it for 3 days. It's not too bad.
Wait, did you say you do positive 7 minus 1 and then negative 7 minus 1?
Yes.
Okay.
Remember, I showed you it. I split it up where it's actually 2 subtraction problems.
Yeah.
But I do it just in my head because I'm too lazy to write out the 2 problems.
Okay.
And I know that 90% of high schoolers are just as lazy as I am, so. Okay. All right, so let's try this one. Number 4. What's the first thing I got to do?
Subtract. I mean, add 63.
Add 60.
Add 63 because I need that C value over on the other side so that I can leave a blank to fill in. So I have n squared plus 2n blank equals 63, and I'm going to leave another blank right there so I remind myself I need to fill in the blank. Both blanks. Okay? So, how do I figure out what goes in the blank?
You divide the B.
I do 2 divided by 2 squared, which happens to be the same as the previous one, isn't it? So this one's going to be turning out pretty similar. Now, if I put the plus 1 in that blank, what do I have to do to the other one?
Put a plus 1.
I have to put a plus 1 on the other side. Still doing okay with that?
Yeah.
All right. So what does this side factor into? N plus 1 squared equals 63 plus 1 is 64. All right, I want you to try and go from there. Okay? Square root both sides and try and get to your 2 answers. Don't look so scared. You. Yes.
What do you need to do with the 2?
Which 2?
2n.
The 2n?
Yeah.
It factored into here because if I do my snowflake and I have 1 and I have 2, it's 1 and 1, n and n. It's n plus 1 times n plus 1. If I multiplied n plus 1 then times n plus 1, I get n squared plus n plus n plus 1. There's my 2n. So the 2 is part of the factoring. You just split it up when you're doing the snowflake. Did that explain it, sort of? Good answer. You should have gotten to there, at least. Yes?
Yep.
Then you're going to do what? Subtract your 1. And n equals positive 8 minus 1 is, and negative 8 minus 1. There's my 2 answers. All right, I want you to try number 5. Start to finish, I want you to try number 5.
I don't think I did this right.
Which one, number 4 or number 5? What's your first step on number 5? Move the 96 over. Then fill in your blanks.
Oh, then you square it.
Your B value is different, but you should still be able to find your C value based on what we did up here.
I don't know if you look at this.
Leave your blank. Leave your blank. Now fill in both blanks. So let's see, negative 8 divided by 2 is what? Negative 4?
Yeah,
And what's negative 4 squared?
6.
So 16 or plus 16 is what's going in both of those places.
Yeah.
Now you can either snowflake the left side, or you can use the shortcut that we were talking about, because you just created a perfect square trinomial.
Yeah.
So what's it going to be? M minus 4 squared equals 96 plus 1 plus 16. Now, this one's a little bit different because, why? You can't square root it nicely. But we've done a lot of stuff with square roots, haven't we? So I still have my plus or minus. I have m minus 4 equals plus and minus. Can I draw a tree for 112? Don't hate trees. They give you oxygen and life. What's 56 divided by 2? 28? As long as I keep seeing these even numbers, I just keep dividing by 2. So what can come out? A 2, and then another 2, and then a 7 left inside. So what do I have? So what is the last step I need to do? Because m isn't by itself yet. I need to add 4. Now, do you remember how we write our answer when we have something being added to a radical? 4 plus or minus 4 rad 7. So I write this one first, and that's my answer. That's as hard as they're going to get today.
Yes.
Okay?
I don't like it either.
All right, let's look at number 6. What do you think I need to do?
Subtract 87.
Subtract 87. Now, this is a little bit different because if you notice, there's already a number here. Do you see that?
Yep, so 3
But it's okay because I can do 3 minus 87 just fine, right?
Yep.
N squared plus 20n blank equals, what's 3 minus 87?
Negative 84.
Yeah? All right, what am I going to be adding to the blank? Oh, need to put my other blank there. 20 divided by 2 is 10, squared is 100. Yes? So I put plus 100 in both of those blanks. So what does this side factor into?
In
N plus 10 squared. Again, you can snowflake if you want to, or you can remember the shortcut. And then on the other side, what is negative 84 plus 100?
Positive
16. I like 16 because I know if I square root 16, it's going to be nice. Square root n plus 10 is equal to positive and negative 4. Subtract my 10. And n equals, what is positive 4 minus 10? And negative 4 minus 10? There's my two answers. So? All right, you try 7 and 8. Those are the last two examples. You try them. Okay? So far, so good?
yeah.
Still good?
Yeah.
What does that factor into? And what? Minus 2 squared equals 25. This shouldn't be too bad. I'm going to add 2. And I get n equals what? 7 and
Negative
3.
-3.
Because positive 5 plus 2 is 7. And negative 5 plus 2 is negative 3. Questions about number 7? All right. I'm going to shut up for a minute and let you guys work through number 8 a little bit. Nine plus 17 is 26, right?
Yeah.
So far, so good?
Yeah.
Negative 14 divided by 2 is negative 7. Squared is 49. So I'm putting plus 49 in both of those blanks. What does this side factor into? V minus 7 squared. 49, 59, is it 75?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to square root both sides. 75 does not have a nice square root, but let me draw a tree. 75 is 25 times 3, 5 times 5, so what comes out? So I have a 5 outside and a 3 inside. So I'm going to add my 9. And how do I write my answer? V equals.
Wait, it should be 7.
Wait, it should be
I'm sorry.
Wait, yeah.
Why did I all of a sudden write a 9? Just to try and confuse you, right, on the last example? That's a 7. So what do I write? 7.
Plus or minus 5 root 5.
Exactly. 7 plus or minus 5 root 3. So? So we'll practice this on tonight's homework and then make it a little bit more difficult tomorrow. Okay? Happy studying!